start, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to you all. Thank you for turning up. I'm sure more people will drift in as that meeting goes on. Thank you for the panel for turning up to this event. And I'll just start off initially giving you a brief discussion about Bahrain Foundation, who we are, and a few minutes doing that, and get on to the topic of discussion today, inshallah. Who's Bahrain Foundation? We're basically a group of local Muslims who want to enter and start a discourse about Islam, and more predominantly Islam in society. What is the role Islam has to play in society? What we find today is that Islam as a way of life is attacked, is vilified, is demonized. We find that's common, and we find that Muslims, by and large, aren't equipped to deal with this attack on Islam. And what we want to do is we want to have this debate. We have to it's an open and honest debate, as the likes of Blair and Cameron keep telling us that they like to have. So, as Muslims, we understand we hold the haq, we hold the truth. So we're happy to have this debate, and we're happy to have this debate on an intellectual level. So for us, we want to discuss a number of issues, whether it be local, regional, or international. And we're holding a handout to our local communities. You know, it's Muslims, non-Muslims, because we've got to live together. We're holding a handout to remove any bias or distrust that they may have about Islam. And inshallah, with the help of Allah, we basically came together at the start of the year. And at the moment, what we do, we're writing articles. We have a blog page set up where we will address topical issues which are raised by either socially, again, regionally or internationally. We've done topics, articles on Jack Straw's comments around grooming and address those. We've talked about Pakistani identity and the whole issue of identity itself. David Cameron's remarks about values and what the values that we need to be holding in society. This is our second event. We've already held a preliminary event which was discussing this taboo subject of mental health. It was an event specifically for sisters. It was held in the local Masjid. Alhamdulillah, it was well received, because again, this is one of the things that as a community we have a tendency to brush under the carpet and ignore. Is something that we need to openly discuss. We brought in health professionals from the NHS, and we discussed it from an Islamic perspective as well, to say what does Islam say about this subject. So alhamdulillah, that was our inaugural event. This today, inshallah, is the second event. We're going to be discussing the Facebook revolution, as we've called it. And we have many other ideas to discuss Islam locally, and we're always open to people who want to join us or want to involve themselves in this work of dawah, because that's what it is. And whatever your skill is, we welcome it, because everyone has a skill. That's my firm belief. Everyone is a leader in something or other. The issue is discover that for yourself and use it for the work of the deen. That's all. So there'll be forms available for people who want to leave the contact details. You're welcome to do so. So I'll briefly now move on to the event and the panel. So as we said, we called it Facebook Revolution. So those people here who are expecting a discussion on Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, technology, apologies. You know, you may have been misled. This isn't about technology. Rather, this is about the Facebook prompted revolutions that we're finding in the Middle East and the wider Muslim world. So we're actually discussing something a lot more interesting, politics. But what we do intend to do, inshallah, is make the subject appealing to you. And we want to discuss the events that are taking place, that are fast-moving events, and what is our understanding of those, what is the likely impact on us as Muslims, citizens or people in the UK. So they will have a combination of questions which have been sent to us on our emails and blogs. We've got some as a chair. I'm going to be asking the panel, and no doubt you'll have some questions as well. So we'll have you're always welcome. There'll be some sheets which we can pass around if you want to write your questions, and if you want to raise your hands. Obviously, I'm going to be true David Dimbleby style. I'm going to control this with an iron fist. So I'd like people to raise their hands before they, but I will give everyone an opportunity to speak. And I was going to say, as my children will no doubt tell you, I like playing the boss, so it's a rule I absolutely do. So I'm going to introduce the panel, and they've kindly sent me some information about themselves, so I'll just run through that. And on the far right, as we said, even further right and extreme right, Jahangir is, you'll all know Anjum, Anwar, MBE, I believe, who's from Blackburn. Dialogue Development Officer is a role working for Blackburn Cathedral, and she's also Director of Woman's Voice since 2007. Sorry?
Woman's Voice.
Woman's Voice, yes, 2009. And her work is involved with community cohesion, education, outreach and interfaith development programme. Prior to that, she was part of LCM, Lancashire Council of Mosques, spearheading the Understanding Islam educational programme. Prior to that, and she's quite openly admitted, she was in today's day and age, I'm surprised, but she's open to saying she was a banker for 30 years. So in today's recession, and I thought you might want to hide that, but I'll share that if you want to share that. And she has a son, Daniel, 17 years old. So, secondly, next to Sister Anjum is Jahangir Mohammed, who is the director of the Centre for Muslim Affairs, which is an independent think tank which looks at Muslim affairs, established in 1997, and it provides political analysis on Muslim affairs both here in the UK and abroad. He was the deputy to the late Dr. Siddiqui of the original Muslim Parliament, which was established in 1992, and has been a leading advocate of revolutionary change in the Muslim world. So quite an apt member of the panel to discuss the events that we're seeing today. And something you also like to say, you always predict it would happen, so I'm sure you have plenty to say about this today. And he's also author of a number of books: Race Relations and Muslims in Britain, Home Office Strategy for Islam and Muslims, and interestingly titled The Final Crusade Against Islam, 9/11 and the Challenge from the Muslim Ummah. This is Jahangir. And on this side of the podium we have Majed Iqbal, who's actually from Rochdale, and he likes to be known as a popular Muslim blogger and freelance journalist. Well-known figure in Rochdale, works at grassroots levels, shaping the views of the Muslims on local, national and international issues, and is fluid in airing his views through writing media and organising events. He's got a well-established blog, which I'd encourage you all to visit, on this good series of articles on there, which thought-provoking topics. Blog's been active for over 4 years, and he also contributes to the local national press. I've seen it many times on the TV on Sunday mornings with what's the chap's name? Nicky Campbell. So a well-known face, not just locally but regionally as well. And finally, right next to me is Asid Mahmood, who's a school teacher. Again, locally, Accrington and Darwen at the moment. He's Director of Education. He was a chairman of Hindburn United Muslims, active member of the Muslim community, and again is actively in terms of attending events and in masjids and in areas in the community. He's an analyst of Islamic political thought and is currently the Education Secretary at the Masjid. So that's a panel for you. So I'm going to go on to today's event. As I said, it's not necessarily about the technological revolution, but no doubt we'll touch on that as well. It's more so the revolution that we find taking place in Muslim countries. I'm very briefly going to run through a timeline, and we could spend the whole afternoon going through, because we're well aware the events have unfolded since the start of the year to today. Is probably at least a decade's worth of events, if not more, if not a century, given that people like Gaddafi and Mubarak, who've been in power for almost as old as I am, not quite, I won't tell you exactly, but almost as old as I am, and they've been removed within months. And it all started off, maybe open to debate. We could argue that WikiLeaks had a role to play in this, with some of the revelations they made actually before Christmas around some of the relationships that the Saudi regime has and their views on Iran, etc. But I guess the common understanding is it started when may Allah accept him, his Shahadat, Mohammed, he set himself to fire in central Tunisian town because the police confiscated his vegetable cart. So he was trying to earn a living, and as a graduate, as an educated person, that's the only thing he could do was sell vegetables. And even that source of income was taken away from him. So protests began in Tunisia in December, they spread to Algeria in December. 4th of January, Mohammed he passed away from his burns, and that then led to this. The funeral led to momentum for the protests to take hold, talking about the unemployment and the repression, and that was popularly known as the Jasmine Revolution. And then continuing through January, there were further protests in Jordan, in Tunisia. Then on January 14th, the President Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali, he fled and went to Saudi Arabia, of all places. He was welcomed there. January 16th, it then escalated in Egypt, where protesters came out on the streets in Cairo. They were chanting, Ben Ali, Salman Mubarak is a plane is waiting for him too. So the same kind of sentiment was there. And on January 20th, this is where we find technology starts taking apart. An Egyptian Facebook group was set up and called for street protests throughout January. And we find that through January, Algeria, Yemen, Egypt, Syria, protests continued and the momentum was built up. Again in Syria, 11,000 people joined the Syrian Revolution Facebook page at the start of Feb. So from overnight they went to a situation where people didn't even know what Facebook was, to actually using it as a tool to instigate change in the country. February the 4th, Bahrain protesters gathered in front of the Egyptian embassy, again calling for change and upheaval. February 11th, we know Hosni Mubarak, after deliberating, after getting mixed signals perhaps from the Americans, decided he was pushed, or he decided to stand down. I'll leave that to the panel to enlighten us on those. And we found continuing events in Bahrain. Police attacked sleeping protesters. The police then came off the streets and gave them food and electricity, etc. So they allowed the protest. We found then it spread to Morocco and Oman as well. So the whole Middle East is embroiled in what we see as uprising. And then in March, obviously the focus has very much been on Libya and the changing scenario there. And again, it's no doubt something else has happened this morning, which I'm not aware of. Bahrain, we can see what's happened there with the Saudi government actually being invited in, we believe, by the Bahraini regime to go and quell the uprising. Yemen, Saudi themselves have outlawed demonstrations, and it's all leading up to what we know next Tuesday, I believe, is the planned demonstrations in Pakistan, known as popularly as Iqbal in Pakistan, which again has been prompted through Facebook itself. So that's really an outline, a very, very brief run through of what we've seen to date. So I'm going to start off with one of our initial questions, and I'll invite the audience in as well. But really, my first question I would put to the panel is a simple one. Yeah. So let's set the scene. What are the protests all about? And you can ask yourself, Jahangir, to kick off on that one.
I think if you just take the protests in isolation and look at the events that we see now, you don't tend to get a picture of what it's all about. And we have to actually look at the slow and gradual changes that have been taking place in the Muslim world over the last 30 years, which have culminated in the revolutionary movements that you've just seen. And you could go beyond 30 years. There's an intellectual element to some of the changes that have happened in thought in the Muslim world. But two key events that shaped the last 30 years and have had a profound impact have influenced this revolution, and they are the jihad in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. So we had the rise of jihad movement, and the second one is the Islamically inspired revolution in Iran. Now, people tend to either take one of them, depending on their beliefs. They'll look at one and say, yes, that was Islamic. They'll look at the other and say, that wasn't Islamic. But what you have to do is look at the change that was produced, and look at these in the sense of the whole Muslim world. These were rebellions against the existing political and Western order, because what we have essentially is a world political order which is dominated, supported, maintained by the West. And when we talk about the West, we're talking about the government, the establishment, the Western political system. Iran was the first break in modern times with that system. So the revolution, the Shah of Iran was the most powerful symbol of Western authority in the Middle East. He was their man. Now that broke, the revolution broke that. And not only did it break that system, it overturned it totally. So the existing system was finished. And you had somebody who was talking a language based on Islam, inspired by Islam, and who was talking about the collapse of communism, fascism, and Western political systems. So that had a profound impact. So that caused a lot of change. I mean, even simple things. Those of you can remember that far back, you never saw many sisters wearing hijab prior to 1979. Then all of a sudden, hijab started becoming more prominent. And whatever we think about the Iranian revolution, the fact remains that Iran is the only independent Muslim state. And that caused great tensions in the world communities, particularly in the West. The other incident that happened was the Afghan jihad and the defeat of the Soviet Union, which not only, because at that time there were two world systems, the Soviet-inspired communism, which is part of the West. Communism is an ideology which came out of the West. So they were the opposite sides of the same coin. And the Western political system. Now, these ragtag army in Afghanistan, and the West likes to take a great deal of credit for this, but actually within 3 years, before they started intervening, they already knew that the Soviet Union was defeated. And then they came in and started funding different sides. So not only were the Soviet Union defeated, they were actually, when their soldiers went back, there was no communism to go back to. The whole system had been dismantled. So the whole struggle was beginning to be shaped. And as a consequence of what happened in Afghanistan, you had jihad movements established elsewhere. And as a consequence of what happened in Iran, you also had some movements, jihad movements. So you had Lebanon, you had the rise of Hezbollah, you had the rise of Hamas. And what this did was, certainly in Lebanon, the Israelis were defeated for the first time, where Arab armies couldn't defeat them. The Hezbollah, which was a militia, what they described as a militia, forced them out of Lebanon. So these processes were going on. And obviously things culminated, and this instability in the Western political system came about, and they tried to re-establish their
so you're saying this is basically a continuation? It's a
continuation, it's a process.
You're saying it's based on the discovery of Islamic identity, is that what you're saying?
It's part of that, but it's also go back to the Iranian Revolution, the cassette. All that Imam Khomeini did was he used to record one cassette, which was distributed throughout Iran, and all the ulama used to distribute that, and that's what caused the revolution. It was known as the cassette revolution.
But I guess one thing that set it off, as I said in the prelude, was it was
a vegetable.
Someone who didn't have the opportunity to earn a livelihood. Now,
that's right.
Is that necessarily the same thing as someone saying, well,
it is, because what's
my
happened,
sentiment is Islam, rather I need to be able to earn a living?
No, the technology, you see what's happening is it's all part of the same process. So that awakening, that awareness, people, as these tensions occurred, as these wars, particularly after 9/11, as the Americans invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, what happened was that people began to see openly that the rulers in their part of the world, who were impoverishing them, were part and parcel of the same political system that was maintained by the West's rulers.
So it's a protest against the the implementation of a certain system or oppression by the rulers.
Well, it's a...
without necessarily being Islamic, though. Would you not say?
Well, I think...
Are they not looking for... Anjum, what would you say? Are they looking for an alternative, but is that necessarily Islam?
You know what really worries me is that, let me just answer that question first. That I read somewhere that there are 4 words that toppled the Tunisian regime. That's Facebook and Twitter. That's what started it.
Is that 4 words?
Facebook and Twitter, that's 4 words. From where I'm sitting. From where I'm sitting.
I thought I might have missed it.
Not at all.
I was waiting for 2 more, but 1.
Which 2?
Carry on, please.
But I think that there is an Islamic consciousness, but also you talked about the Iranian Revolution, and you're absolutely right. If you look back pre-1979, we did not have as many headscarves. We did not have as many Islamic societies, even on campuses. I mean, I remember many years ago when I was a student, that Islamic, we didn't have that kind of consciousness. I did not wear a headscarf. I did not physically go out and say, today I'm going to wear it. So I think what the Iranian Revolution did was give an identity which had been lost for a lot of Muslims because we were so heavily affected by a secularized way of living that we didn't have. So I think it did help. It did help to raise consciousness and raise an identity. And I think that identity in this, the world that we live in market values, was saying, hold on a minute, who am I? What am I fighting? And today, if we take that away just for 2 minutes and look at what is happening in the Arab world, and we are crying out for democracy, and the people who have been ruling it for the past 30, 40 years, my real fear is that you take those people out, you take Gaddafi out, you take Mubarak out, what are you left with? Who do you replace them with? What system do you replace them with? Do we have a system? Do we have an infrastructure? Because let's just have a look at India. We've had people in India and in America who have been in power for 30, 40 years. You've had congressmen who have been in power for 30, 40 years. Is that democracy? So the word that we're playing around today in semantics, that we're going to replace democratic rights in the Arab world, I'm not convinced.
So your fear is that there then is a vacuum?
Absolutely. And what will happen in that vacuum? What will happen in that vacuum? It frightens me.
Majed?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of like the way the news that we've been following, Sky News, BBC News, and the world international media, whenever they've gone and reported on these protests, what I find is that they've handpicked certain people who've said what we need to hear in the Western capitals, in the Western part of the world. We've gone to people, so what do you want? We want removal of this particular ruler, and we want democracy, we want freedom, we want human rights. Now, in essence, these words are, pretty much buzzwords that we tend to hear, and we then associate them with good things. We associate them with, having a government which is locked into good governance. People, rights are respected. You can't abuse people. If somebody does that, then somebody, will get locked up or they'll be sentenced for something. So the Western media has played upon all of these things to sway the discussion away from any discussion on people want some form of change which is based upon their belief, based upon their history, based upon their tradition, and based upon their cultural values. So I think that's quite important, that when we look at these key phrases, what Muslims in Tunisia and Pakistan and Bahrain and these other areas, Iraq even, been kind of experiencing protests, Kuwait, Yemen, what exactly do they mean by this word democracy? What does it really mean for them? What does this word freedom mean to them? So in the West, freedom means that I can be gay, or a woman can wear a bikini on a beach, and there's no problem with that. I should have no problem with that. And that is protected by the law. So you can't sit down and start, harassing the person here, because then you'll get gripped by the police. Is that the freedom which the Muslims are talking about? And it's not. What they mean by the word freedom is they want to move away from the oppression and the tyranny that they've been living under. You're living under societies, and even at university we had Egyptian friends, Arab friends, Iraqi friends, and they would tell us about the lifestyle that they live, where security services can pull up in a car, you're walking with your family, with your sons, with your daughters, with your siblings, and the male will push them to a side and start harassing them, putting their face to face like this, pushing them around, and just generally just pestering them. And that's the lifestyle that they've...
So getting back to the question, the protests fundamentally are about injustice or oppression, is that what you're... coupled with this search for an identity based on something that they believe in, is that what
definitely? I mean, the West, what it's really trying to do is to move away from the discussion that people want any form of Islamic change.
Right.
So even in their reportage, that is completely put down to the side. You find when Cameron goes to Egypt, he doesn't even talk to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the largest party in Egypt, who has a possible route of succession into politics in Egypt, and he just completely dismissed them because they don't want to even bring that onto the agenda table, that Islam can have a say in the political, social and economic life of those countries.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to take a step back because maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit, and we need to look at the opinion on the ground. And initially the opinion on the ground, for example, a commonality you see in the whole of the Muslim world is that people are chanting, Ashab, Yurid, Isqat and Nizam, yeah? That they want a removal of the regimes, right? In Bahrain, for example, we have the Ummah in Bahrain saying the Sunnis and the Shias, they will never sell this country. Now, this is the commonality across the whole of the Middle East, and it's, spreading.
So it's a removal of the regime.
It's a removal of the regime.
That's the first demand, or is that the only demand?
That's the initial setup.
That's the initial setup.
Right? Now you've got to understand is what does that actually mean? When they want the regime to be removed, what is this regime they want to be removed? How do they view this regime? And to be honest with you, whether you mention the WikiLeaks or whether it's a Facebook revolution, what you'll see is Muslims are starting to look back to the history and think, okay, wait a minute, what was the Sykes-Picot Treaty, in 1916 really all about?
Do you think they're doing that in the Muslim world? The man on the street, I think you talked about going to the man on the street.
I know brothers from the Muslim Brotherhood, I know people from the Liberation Party, I know people from the Sunni organisations, I know people, and this is, the Islamic history is quite, well understood in the Muslim world. Okay. So I think when they talk about regime change, these people are not people who just come out of a cave. These people have lived under oppression. These people have felt the shocks that this ummah has gone through. It was actually, like the brother mentioned, it was the Egyptian army that defeated the Israelis in '73. So the Muslims, they actually know about their history, they know about their leaders, and they know what this regime is. This regime has been set up. All these regimes, the dictators, are puppets of who? Of Britain, France and America. So when we say these Muslims, they want democracy, these Muslims, they want a freedom, I think Muslims mustn't fall into the trap where we start thinking, yes, this freedom and this democracy is the way forward.
Okay, I mean, we'll come on to a lot of those. We've got a series of questions which address some of these issues around democracy and etc. I'll just take a question from the audience and we can give you a chance. Yes,
it's really interesting to see how social media has, in the eyes of many people, seem to have toppled governments and is asking for radical change. Can the panelists please just comment on the relationship that Britain and America has with these regimes prior to this? And then when we talk about the vacuum, is how will this relationship then look to replace these existing regimes with something else? Because I think in all of this, in what the people are calling for, or where the sentiments lie, we're still missing the fact that there is still people in the background who are working to replace these regimes. So we need to understand the relationship between the Western nations and the Muslim countries, and where is that change going to lead to? Is this the right change that we want?
I think we need to understand what's actually happened. We've got revolutionary movements. We haven't yet got a revolution. The systems are still intact. Now, when we used to study the revolutions and the Iranian Revolution, what we thought would happen is that in the Sunni world, in our world, the same thing would happen. that you would have religious leaders, ulama, who would lead the revolution. Unfortunately, what's happened here in the Sunni world is that the people have been ahead of the scholars and the movements. Many of the Islamic movements had gone into the political system, will work through the system, will change elections, and had been compromised, particularly as a result of their relationship with Saudi Arabia. And so the people were way ahead. So what we have is actually a bit of a vacuum. You need three elements for a revolution. You need the people, you need leadership, and you need an alternative ideology. Now, we have the people. The leadership has not yet emerged, or if it's there, it's not become articulate, and the ideology has not been espoused. So, although it's there, the people are saying it, the people are talking, they understand that the regimes that they're trying to get rid of are supported, aided, and have been, basically given life by the Western political system. The religious ulama and the scholars and our movements have not yet begun to espouse that alternative ideology. Now, it's a revolutionary movement, so it's still in flux.
Okay.
So there's time for that to happen. Now, there's no law that says if the ulama or the scholars are not doing it, the people shouldn't be doing it. So over time, I think it will emerge. It's just that the people in this case have been way ahead of the ulama and the scholars, and the media. The change that has happened, the media is a means of communication. It helps to create awareness and consciousness. And what has undoubtedly happened is that the last 10 years, particularly after 9/11, the relationship between those rulers in the Muslim world and the West that backs, aids, supports them, has become pronounced, and everybody can see it. We've had Al Jazeera, we've had Press TV, and then we've had Facebook, WikiLeaks. So people have become aware of that relationship. So there's a consciousness and an awakening of what the reality, the political reality is. Over time, I think that will begin to change, and there are scholars, and there are ulama, and there are movements, and this is a natural course.
So this is a grassroots movement, prompted by the people, using social media as a tool, perhaps. What would be your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's probably too early for us to see what kind of change we can go for, but I think it's an opportunity for the Muslims especially to discuss what change should be, as opposed to just get drawn into these events and say, yeah, we are going to have a change. Now is the time to discuss what change is needed. Do we need to replace the regime, give it another label, but ultimately still controlled by the Western forces? Or do we need a radical change whereby, the people will revert back to their roots, essentially to the Islamic history?
There's a very important questions you've raised, and you talk about that vacuum, which I mentioned earlier. For that to happen, you need strong, religious, literate leadership. And I believe in my world, which is the Sunni world, we are missing on that.
That probably mirrors what the brother was saying, that they've not been at the forefront of this.
Something happened in Iran, and we're not talking about 1979, we're talking about hundreds of years ago. Please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an academic nor an alima, but the theology changed from Akhbari to Usuli. And that was a very important thing to happen. The mindset changed.
Do you want to try and
Shall I explain? Do you want me to explain it?
Please,
Sure,
be
some
my
of us
guest.
You see, I mean, this is when I said the 30 years you could go back.
Yeah.
See, at the heart of Shia theology, and I'm talking as a Sunni studying it, they had their view was always that unless Imam Mahdi returns, you can't establish Islamic government. Now, Imam Khomeini brought the Shias closer to the Sunni position, which was that you can and you must establish an Islamic state. And even if Imam Mahdi is not there, it's incumbent on Muslims to establish Islamic government, because 2/3 of the Quran is about social laws. If you say Islamic rule is not necessary, you're saying the Quran is redundant. 2/3 of the Quran is redundant. And this was the simple point that Imam Khomeini was making, that if you're a Muslim, you believe this is the final deen, the final revelation, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did not leave this world until he fulfilled the creation of the Islamic governance and state, then you have to work to establish it. You can't have a period of vacuum and wait, well, Imam Mahdi will come and he'll do the job for all of us. So this was the change, intellectual change that happened in Iran, which led to, and there was there's still resistance to that. I mean, Iraq, there are Shia communities who don't accept that position.
But even in Iran.
Even in Iran.
There are, in fact, if you look at, even now there are pockets. And I think this is so important that we have to understand that in my world, and I keep coming back to this my world, that we have to have religious, literate leadership, which can bring people together. We have factions, there's so many factions. Sitting in this room, I can hear we probably have 100 factions. And I think
probably
that,
not quite 100 here,
okay,
but that's any point.
And I think that's a very important point, that we need to come under that, and we need that one leadership. You know, I'm a great believer, and I'm not even sure whether I should be saying this on the media. You know, and I'm talking about the Khilafat movement, but not the Khilafat of Al-Mahjaroon. I'm talking about the Khilafat movement of Maulana Muhammad Ali, and I'm talking about pre-47, that kind of Khilafat movement.
Okay.
So I think that needs to be...
We'll come on to that, because obviously we've got a discussion on what's going to happen in Pakistan as well, but sorry.
Yeah, just to go back to I think the original question was, what is driving the...
Yeah,
what is it all about? I was watching a program just after the Egyptian revolution happened, and what they were saying was that 3-4 years ago, the Americans were in the developing stages of Facebook, and they had people from Egypt and other Muslim countries actually going to America and being taught how to use Facebook to create revolution. Just yesterday, I was reading on the technology page of the BBC website that they've got some ghost people who are creating multiple like users. So one person is acting as if he's 50 different people and initiating discussion, and they're all in either Urdu, Arabic, Farsi. In the Muslim world, they're using those languages. So are these revolutions, my question is, are these revolutions, most of the speakers have said that they're Islamically inspired, are they not actually Western inspired revolutions, because they've got to the point where they realize Gaddafi is not their man anymore, Mubarak is not their man anymore, they need to create a revolution and to instill a new leader. So it's not actually, would you agree or disagree that they're not actually Islamic revolutions as such? They've actually been instigated by Western powers who have been training people how to use Facebook and how to utilize it to create a revolution.
I think that's quite a valid point, because if we go back to the early part of this new millennium, we found that there were similar revolutions in the ex-Russian republics of Georgia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, where they had these, the coloured revolutions, the rose and the orange and the tulip revolutions. Now again, I think there's sufficient evidence to show that these revolutions were not revolutions by the people, but they were instigated by the West and the US.
I don't think
to actually weaken.
I don't think that's the case at all. I think if you look at what happened in Tunisia and Egypt, it caught the West totally by surprise. The one place that they have been trying to instigate that for the last 30 years, and they've got 20 satellite channels beaming into Iran, they've had the Facebook, they've had everything, they've not succeeded. Egypt, they were backing Mubarak till the very end. So, don't let the West fool you. They say this with everything. Every achievement that the Muslims, they say with the Afghan jihad, well, without us we destroyed the Soviet Union. No, they didn't. Facebook or cassettes or Al Jazeera or Press TV, these are technology. Technology doesn't belong to the West alone. It's knowledge, it belongs to everybody. The fact is that the media, before Facebook, the media in the Muslim world and the Arab world has played a significant revolution in highlighting the things that are going on in Palestine, the bombing by the Israelis in Lebanon, when the Arab rulers supported the Christians against Hezbollah. You know, the impact of that on the Arab street, during the war in Lebanon, when the Saudi regime and the others were supporting, you know, blaming Hezbollah for everything, the anger in the Arab street was amazing. You know, people who were in Jordan were telling me that, you know, the people on the street knew what was happening, and they were so angry against their rulers.
I'm not talking about the technology itself. I'm talking about how to use that technology. So in the training of, I'm just going off what this program was saying, that they actually had handpicked people who had gone from Egypt to America on how to utilize the technology. I'm not saying, yeah, the technology was invited by the Americans and it's not their property. It's how they actually use that technology to create an idea, to implant an idea, and to create this revolution.
I mean, I want to rule out what brother is saying there in terms of how the West infiltrates certain nations via, you know, setting up groups, organizations, individuals, giving them this training, and that's been the case with all the Muslim rulers. So whether it's you know, Bilal Bhutto, who's in London, or whether it's Nawaz Sharif's son who's in London, okay, or whether it's King Abdullah from Jordan, who got trained in Sandhurst, again in the UK, and we've got those who are then obviously positioned, you know, more favourable towards the American stance on things. So this is not nothing new in terms of like how these leading nations will use tools like these to, you know, groom people to favour their positions in the world arena. And the case for this, I think, is the Raymond Davis case, which is fantastic to kind of like highlight this. What is this guy doing in Pakistan? And when his case got exposed, look at the lies that got fabricated. So we had one of the ministers resigning over the issue because Zardari said to him, basically, lie about this particular case. So I'm not favouring that minister anyway, because that guy was a blatant liar, and, you know, in terms of what he's done, I'm not going to stand for anyway. So it wasn't a noble thing that he did anyway. But the fact that he's, look, we'll be corrupt here, but you're taking the mick here. I can't do that. You know, if I get gripped here, you know, you'll have me killed for doing something else. I'll get hanged in the streets of Pakistan, I'll get shot dead for doing this. So Raymond Davis, you know, what on earth is this guy doing here? Blackwater from America, who's been going into Pakistan. Again, none of them have got passports. You can't get into any country without showing a valid passport, and these people are being, you know, fled through. There's been so many cases where there've been arrests being made by the police legitimately. They've caught somebody and they've looked in their cars, they've got weaponry inside there, they've got, you know, fantastic technology, and then the government has then released them after that then. So, I mean, there is an element there. I do believe that the West, you know, would use these tools there, but I think I agree with the brother's position, Jahangir's position, that this momentum of the revolution was they were caught completely off guard.
Yeah.
But what they did do, this was the last point, with the Egypt case, they had to wait. So even the army, they could not start getting heavy-handed. They controlled it, not because they believed in that particular revolution, but the fact is that the orders from America were, okay, wait and see policy, let these kind of like, you know, protests go further ahead, let's see what's going to come out of them. You don't do anything, otherwise that will then legitimize their revolution even further, cause further discontent, and we'll lose our standing in that particular area.
You tend to see that happening in places like Bahrain, where they've changed their stance from taking the police and army off the streets and subsequently putting them back out after Robert Yates has visited. So maybe they're trying to control the fallout of this grassroots movement from behind the scenes, given that these are ongoing.
So Hillary Clinton's, you know, visit to Tunisia, and again going back to the point that the revolutions are not complete yet.
Sure.
Because these people are now back into their backyards again and trying to reshape now how they can maneuver all these changes that have been made back to
Anjum, final point on this before we move on.
You raised an important point. There's an element of truth in what you're saying. But if you just look what happened in Egypt, let's just imagine hypothetically that we had these ghosts in Egypt and they were doing whatever they were supposed to be doing. Do you think these same ghosts were present in Bahrain? Do you think it is in American interest to remove the present regime?
Probably not.
No. Right, so who is behind the Bahrain? I believe there's injustices being done in this part of the world. And people are sick to death. And it comes a point where that young man set himself on fire to say enough is enough. The issue is that what do we do, who do we replace with these, because they've been around for so many darn years, that who are we going to replace these people with? So we need to create, and the revolution, as Jahangir just said, is a starting point. The system is still intact.
Okay.
Well, I mean, just one last point. I was in Egypt for 2.5 years, and I got out about 2 days before the revolution started. I was out there working, and I'm an English teacher, and a lot of my work was doing conversational English. So most of the conversations we would have would be about politics, because they felt in a classroom environment, they felt safe enough with a foreigner to be able to discuss it. And there would be discussion, there would be comments like walls have ears. And in Arabic there is a saying that is translated as walls have ears. So they were very careful about what they had to say, what they were going to say. So I'm well aware, and I mean, I would agree with you that the people had had enough. And alhamdulillah, I managed to get out about 2 or 3 days before the revolution started. And most of the people, and the thing about democracy and stuff that the brothers were talking about, in the discussion, even the Christians, they make out like there's a big Christian and Muslim divide within Egypt. And what I found while I was there, and I had many classes which were mixed classes, this whole idea of secularism and the definitions of democracy, even the Christians would say, yeah, and the Christians are real Christians in Egypt, where they will, you ask them to introduce themselves and they will say, my hobby is reading. What do you read? I read the Bible. So this is something that they are real Christians who practice their belief. And the idea of not applying religious law is not acceptable to them, even if it's Christian law. But the point is that they're not secular people. They want their beliefs and their values to be implemented in the laws. So I do agree that the whole definition of democracy, when they say we want democracy, that means that we want to choose our own leader. It doesn't mean we want to be able to have the full freedoms that the brother talked about. So all they want is that we want to choose our leaders, and those leaders need to be able to be removed if they're not serving us. So I think this thing about Christian-Muslim divide is just another thing that the Western governments are putting in as something to agitate the people, to say, look, you can't have Islamic law because there's all these Christians and it's not acceptable to them. And I'm sure it would be if it came.
Okay.
Rule and divide has always
Yeah,
been
that's right.
Just one last point on
Last point before I move on.
the vegetable salad. See, the injustice got to such a level that Imam Khomeini used to say that the only power that these rulers have over you is the power of life and death. Once you lose the fear of dying, they're finished. They're history. And that's what happened here with the people. The injustice was so great. Our scholars, instead of talking that this injustice was against Islam, that what the rulers was doing was un-Islamic, it wasn't permissible, they were given fatwas actually saying, no, you mustn't rebel against the rulers. So the people were way ahead of actually a lot of the leaders of the movements and the rulers, and the injustice became so intolerable that it had to go. But there's a reason for that injustice. Maybe later on when we talk about the Western political system.
I'll come on to the next question, which is, we've touched upon it in a few areas, but I'm going to then refer to something David Cameron said yesterday. And the question that we've got is, what's the role of the Western nations, such as the US, UK and Europe, in the uprising? And I'm going to make specific reference to, we probably heard David Cameron yesterday when they were justifying the stance they've taken, the approach in terms of Libya, in terms of enforcing a no-fly zone, sanctioned by the UN, and some of his reasons, which I guess as a British national, you could probably listen to those and think, okay, this sounds reasonable. I'm just going to read some other out to give some context here. So he was talking about the involvement in Libya. He says, look, Libya lies on the southern borders of Europe, so we have an interest. We can't allow, I think, as you've said, a vacuum to be filled by whoever, on our southern borders. He spoke honestly about there being a national interest. He says there may be a moral duty, but we can't shy away from the fact that there is a national interest in this. that we cannot allow a country so close to our borders to develop the way in which we stand by and watch. And he did talk about the moral case, the fact that we may be witnessing history for another massacre while we stand by and watch it happen, while Gaddafi does what he does with his people. He talked about the need for democratic reform, and you know, without getting into the detail of, I think we've touched on what is democracy, but they also talked about the fact that there are many places that the UK and the US could intervene. In reality, they're restricted. They cannot intervene everywhere. So, he gave an example of Zimbabwe. Look, we have to look at, whereas we may have interest, we need to look at our national interest to say where is it we choose to intervene because we haven't got unlimited resources. And he also justified it by saying that, look, this is not a UK movement, this is a UN-backed movement. And he was also talking the need for involvement by the Arab nations as well. So it was very much sold as this is not just the UK or the Western nations acting in isolation, this is the UN, given a mandate by the Arab countries as well. So hence it was given that kind of respectability that this isn't the US, UK just pushing national interests. So how would we answer that?
Yeah, I think it ties into the last bit of discussion that you had, and there's a great danger that Muslims may get fooled again. We can see the fruits of what David Cameron's saying already. So if we look to the new proposed government in Tunisia, straight away, within days of coming into power, they banned 3 political organisations straight away. The organisation of Ahl Sunnah, you know, the Islamic organisation, and the Liberation Party. So what we see is straight away, the Tunisian government's done this. Today we see in Egypt, you know, the new referendums and Muslims looking to change the constitution, so they're changing the leadership from 6 years to 4 years and so on. And what we need to understand is the only way we will make real change is not by changing faces, it's not by, you know, modifying a system which was previously backed by Western nations. Real change is going to come through a change that fits naturally with the values of the people, which will sit naturally with the beliefs of the people and the historical, you know, perspective of those people that live in their lands. So what you see, what we must be falling into the trap of is, just because there's a new political order in the Muslim world, right, and it may seem that the people have actually put this political order in place, what Muslims need to actually take a step back and maybe have this as a discussion is understand that real change and that system that is only going to fit naturally with the people of that land is that system that actually falls into place with their own beliefs, their own value system and so on. And I think to start to see that just because the Western dictators have been toppled, we've made some sort of credible move forward would be wrong, and it's a great danger. So I think what needs to happen is that Muslims need to start to discuss, okay, what is the correct system that we need to put on the table, which agrees with the values of the people of that land, which agrees with their beliefs, which doesn't contradict any of the Islamic principles that the actual whole heritage.
Isn't there an assumption then in what you're saying that as a people of that nation, they all aspire to the same thing?
Okay,
is that,
I mean, just to give you
because
some
I've seen enough clippage on the TV where people have been calling for different things, and some of them are obviously not compatible.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. So for us to think that Muslims in that land automatically want an Islamic system, you know, I think the sister, she mentioned the Khilafat movement or the Caliphate, you know, this is an alternative, right? For us to automatically think that this vacuum will be filled with something like this, we need to actually start to examine all this. Do people actually understand what is, because there's a further vacuum in the Muslims, and that vacuum that you see in the Muslim world is, what is Islamic politics? Because why is it on one hand you're saying we want to remove these regimes, but then ban Islamic political parties in these lands who will actually propose a constitution, put it on the table and say, look, this is the way forward. Yeah, and Brother Jahangir, he mentioned, you know, the components of a revolution. One thing I would add to that is that the military in these lands is a very, very important component of a revolution. And we know this not by me doing some sort of political analysis on this, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made the first ever, if you like, a revolution against the leaders of his time. So we see the Abu Jahals, the Abu Lahabs, the leaders in Madina, they were toppled by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And within his revolution, what we saw is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he put on the table a beautiful political system that agreed with the nature of man, because it was from the Creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll just leave it to that.
Okay, yes.
Young man, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a just insan kamil when he brought the revolution. I tell you what, as a woman frightens the daylight out of me. Do I want Saudi style of government where I could live? I couldn't live. So that frightens the daylight out of me because I need to drive. I couldn't drive. May not seem much, but do I want a political, religious system like they will have in the Saudi Arabia to be replaced in Egypt or in Bahrain or in Libya? No. That would not be
what they're saying, even amongst the Muslims, amongst this table, is there a difference of opinion of what we all, as Muslims,
I mean,
as practice Muslims, is what is it that we are all seeking?
I mean, this is a very, very important factor, because this is exactly my point. My point is that if you look to the implications of what's going on in the Muslim world today, it has a direct impact on years and years of colonization and culturing of the Muslims. What the West has done is they redefined what is Islamic politics. Just to let me finish.
How would you
so for example,
on that specific
I mean,
point?
let's just
look at that specific point.
That specific point. So that specific point.
If you have
today, Muslims, if you say to Muslims today, what is your definition of Sharia? You'll have 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 different variations of what is Sharia. What we need to understand is that the Prophet, like you said, he brought us a system which was based on elected government, right? It was a system which actually was a system that brought the women out, the gutter into the highest point, right? It was a system that, distributed the wealth equally amongst its masses. Yeah? So what we see is that you have all these alternative Islamic kind of discussions out there, but what is that system? How will you identify what is that? The Saudi government isn't that system.
So you're making the
So you're
distinction
saying
between
that
the Saudi government
regime is irrelevant and it's not correct.
The
That's all I
Saudi
need to
regime is, is a religion.
So does that give you comfort?
Thank God, that's all I can tell.
But this is an important point, because today, why is it Muslims fear the Sharia? Why is it
It's not the
Muslims?
Sharia that I fear. I
Sharia
live according to
maybe
the Sharia.
the interpretation of Sharia
No,
and it's
no,
well by
this is what I'm
government.
pertaining to. Why is it that Muslims today think that there's no political system in Islam? And this is a vacuum that we need to actually engage in and discuss.
Okay, I'm just going to go to members of the audience here.
To extend on that point, whilst it's credible for Muslims to fear, Saudi style of government or Bahraini style of government, whatever, I think any Muslim who's prepared to, sit down and analyse, soon come to the conclusion that to label any Islamic country so-called, as the Islamic system is misguided. Sharia does not mean any of those systems. It would be entirely different to any of those systems. To say women's rights are infringed by the Saudis, therefore we don't want Sharia. I mean, that conclusion, that link shouldn't ever have to be made, because it makes no sense. The Saudis do not have Sharia, Muslims in general do not have Sharia, and we do not live by Sharia. That's a fact.
So does that then lead to this? Does this not then lead to this vacuum that we've talked about? If what the Saudis and the
that's exactly what I was
Bahraini,
going to come to. So what we need
who
to
have
define,
an interpretation of Sharia,
what we need to
that's what we're
define,
told. If that's not Sharia, then what is Sharia and where's it going to come from?
the standard we, sorry,
Yeah, let me finish.
the standard we have, and the sister alluded to it, is the Prophet ﷺ was a just human being, but he wasn't just that. He was perfection of humanity. He brought the perfect system. So we don't need to look at any of the sources to see what Sharia is. We need to sit down and analyse what was the system that the Prophet ﷺ brought. How do we implement that in our life?
So is that something that's confined though to history books and we don't see it in the world, so how are we going to implement it?
I think we're jumping ahead. The revolutions haven't happened yet, and we're already talking about the theology. See, what's going to happen? If you look at the world, it's very complex. The Muslim world is very complex. And we need to be realistic as well. What you're going to get. I mean, most of us most of the Sunni world would say that the Shia version of Islam is not the correct version. But the revolution in Iran was Islamically inspired according to their beliefs. Now, the theology in Iran will take longer to change. If you get a revolution in Saudi Arabia, most of the Sunni world will say, well, we don't follow that school of thought. But it will still be an Islamically inspired revolution. The theology will take time, and similarly you will have this throughout all of the Muslim countries. To go back, and I agree with what the brother is saying, we need to go back to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu time and the correct version of Islam. But to get there will take a long time, because
we need the process.
And we need the process, and that debate and that thing will have to be led by the ulama and the scholars. We're expecting to get there in one phase. It's not going to happen, because the theology from the time of the Prophet has drifted so much, is deviated, as Dr. Kaleem would say. A lot of the theology we have is deviant theology. He used to say that to the Shias and to the Sunnis, that what you have is deviant theology, and it will take a long time. So the political change will happen first, where we are in agreement, most Sunni, Shias, whatever school of thought, that the Islamic State is the right model for political system for Muslims. The theology and the change in theology will be much slower, and it will take time.
Okay, thank you. Majed?
Yeah, I mean, just like in this country, when it comes to election time, Labour, Conservative and Lib Dem, what they'll say to us, vote for us, otherwise the BNPs will come in. Okay, so there's a same fear factor which is used even for these discussions here now, that look, what we need is a system which is helped and resurrected by kind of the Western states. They will, groom, train, monitor, whatever, and bring you back on your feet again. But in that process here, if we don't cooperate with us, then the Islamists are going to get into power. So they'll actually use the same card that we actually, we've got experience of this over here as well. They kind of like bully us into voting when, in essence, we don't want to possibly, so in most cases, we don't see any difference between Labour, Lib Dems or Conservatives. I think, they're all the same policies and etc. And they use that kind of like that trump card. If you don't do it, these guys are going to come in and these guys are going to make your life hell in your own areas. Very similarly, this is the same thing, and I think Asad's point is crucial here. Historically, over the last 50 to 60 years, how have they been doing exactly the same thing in the Muslim world? They've been saying that Islam, if it comes into power, will mean women, less rights for them. It will mean, these are the head of the states. They've been using this type of propaganda to keep the Muslim masses thinking that's that secular
ideology. It's not just
ideology.
propaganda, England. I'm sorry, Majed,
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. It's not just, I agree. I live according to Sharia to the best of my ability in a country which is not ruled by Sharia. This is not the fear of Sharia, it's the people who implement the Sharia who are not religiously literate that will be implementing, that would be my fear. It's not religion that is fearful.
Yeah.
And no, as a woman, and I'm talking as a woman, the discussions and the things that are happening in Pakistan to women, it's appalling. It's whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether any Muslim state. I, as a woman, can live a better Muslim in a non-Muslim country than I can think of any Muslim country that I can live and be a Muslim.
And
that is a fear, and it's a real genuine
the Western
fear.
world that plays upon that. They sell us this.
No,
So if you look
but
at
isn't that a fact too? Can I go to Pakistan and say that let's discuss blasphemy law?
Yeah.
I'll be shot down tomorrow. I didn't say that repeal
and
it.
the way
I
the
said
West
discuss it.
interpret that is this is what Sharia means to these people.
Yep.
Intolerance. It means no other minorities can
But
live
the
with
point
you.
I'm trying to make
I mean,
is
there's really
fear
no
is
stance.
very real fear. 50% of the population, we are 50% of the population, and we gave birth to the other 50%. So trust me, it's very real.
But the West plays upon this even in this country as well, in European countries. They'll say to us, look, what we have is what you don't have. And the fact that you come here, you can build mosques, you can have Islamic groups, in certain areas you can even hear the adhan for certain set times of the day.
Probably hear it here.
You
Yeah.
can.
In a short while.
Yeah.
Even in the cathedral, perhaps.
Yeah, women
We
are a
do
lot more
have
free
a-
in terms of doing things. The education, the politics, you can have a say inside that. What they're selling us is the total package. This is the package which you need now for the Muslim world and not Islam. And this is the danger here. What we've got to show now is, hang on, we're living in this society. We can see plenty of dents. We can see plenty of not even dents, but gaping holes in the systems that that kind of are above us. And the way day-to-day things are not getting any better, but actually getting worse.
Again, I'm going to only insist on the panel. Are you comforted by the words of?
I just want to imagine
Of this.
if we as Muslims in this country, I believe there are about 3 million Muslims in this country, 2.5, 3 million. I am a teacher by profession, and when I go and teach in schools where they've never seen a Muslim or a woman with a headscarf, it's great, it's easy, because I can demystify facts from it. When I go in an area where there are a lot of Muslims, that's where I have major issues. Because what these non-Muslims are seeing is culturalized Islam. You know, the guy who goes to Jummah and then to the pub in the evening, there's your conflict. So maybe if we as Muslims lived the experience, then we would not have that fear, and we could live, even in a non-Muslim country. So I think
I think the sister's fear is genuine, but you see the solution, as we said, the greater fear is, at the moment, is the poverty, the sheer oppression that's happening to women. I mean, when the West tells you you're not going to have women's rights, I tell them, well, are you giving the women in Palestine rights?
Absolutely.
They don't have a right to live. You're starving them. The reality is that women have to be part of the Islamic revolution and the process, and that's what will give you the right. No, you will. That's how you will be able to resist what you fear so much, because as women realise that they are part and parcel of the process, as they did in Iran, as they are in some, in Bahrain, in other places, they are leading. Egypt, in Libya. So then the rulers and the ruling system will, have to deal with the real live issues, and not with some spurious bits of theology. And the other thing that happens is theology, history, and time actually sorts out the false theology.
Okay, I'm going to move on from there, because I think, again, we're moving on to another question.
I didn't get to say something on the West policy. See, what's happening is that they're actually trying to resist the change that the Muslim world is trying to bring.
Okay, that's fine.
And that's important. All their efforts are to try and maintain that control and to maintain that order. And that's an important point.
Brother in the audience, the question?
My comments were like the religion and its interpretation of Islam in Saudi Arabia. As an Ajami, if a Saudi guy bangs into me in a car, it's my fault. That's the religion there, and it's not Islam. If Sister Yvonne Ridley can go and come out in 10 days as a Muslim with the proper ulamas, there is hope. There is Islam, proper Islam as well today.
Okay, just going to move on, because again we touched on a few points there on my next question, which is related, but again just try and explore it a little further.
She didn't come out of Saudi Arabia,
Afghanistan.
I think
That's even worse as perceived.
Yes.
This question is on what, again, coming back to Saudi and what the Grand Mufti said, where he basically outlawed the protests as being anti-Islamic. And I'm just going to read out the comment, where it says, the Council of Senior Clerics affirms that demonstrations are forbidden in this country. I think this is to do when you say about how do we get to, what's the process to get to where we think we want to be. Now, if our senior clerics are the ones who are representing the theologians, who are representing the Muslims, are saying demonstrations are forbidden, the correct way in Sharia of realising common interest is by advising. And he makes reference to the Prophet ﷺ, because this is what the Sunnah is. And this was the body headed up by Sheikh Abdulaziz Al-Sheikh. Reform and advice should not be by demonstrations in ways that provoke strife and division. This is what the religious scholars of this country in the past and now have forbidden and warned against. The Council warns of deviant ideological political connections, since this nation is one and will adhere to the ways of the pious ancestors. The kingdom has not and will not follow ideas from the east or west that takeaway from this Islamic identity and divide the unity of the whole. So then you've got a very clear statement from one of probably the leading Sunni clerics in the Muslim world, who's outlawing the movement and the uprising against the regime. So
you know the beauty. Just before you get in, that's brilliant. What was the message that was sent out by the martyrdom of Hazrat Hussein?
I mean, that's exactly the point. You see, what I love about history and revolution is that it corrects theology. So, for years, our scholars have been coming up with hadith and quotes from the Quran which justify and legitimize their rule. And in my experience, brothers here know that I talk freely and openly.
I'm recording it.
And you're recording it. And for years, whenever I've talked about the Saudi regime, people will behave as if you swore at their mothers. And they will give you, Islamic quotes and, theology. And some of these are so silly. For example, the bits about obeying the ruler as long as they establish salah. These things have been common. Look, you're allowed to disobey your own parents if they don't follow Islam, but you must follow the ruler and obey the ruler. Which scholars are giving these fatwas? And as the sister said, you're not allowed to rebel against the rulers. What is the lesson of Imam Hussein? We're not Shias, but one of the things that the Arab world has done, they have made the remembrance of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein almost non-existent in their world, because it threatens their rule. Because here is theology, which here is a leader from the household of the Prophet Muhammad who says, I don't recognize you as a legitimate ruler. And the Yazids of today, the Gaddafis, the Saudi rulers, what are they trying to get? Just as they did with Imam Hussein, they're trying to say, will you give us bay'ah? Will you give us your allegiance? You support us, support our rule. And as Imam Hussein said, no, he's not going to do that. And he took up arms and he rebelled. And we had the same situation with Yazid. Scholars actually gave the fatwa that allowed for his slaughter. They led the Jummah that day before, and gave the instruction. So, theology.
So this is an uprising against the political order.
And it looks daft. Can you imagine?
And the theological order? Is that what we're saying?
No, it's destroying the theology, because the people who are in the midst of revolution will look at this and say, this is not Islam. They're saying this is un-Islamic. Just before the revolution in Egypt, the people in Al-Azhar were saying, this is not allowed. Then after the revolution, he's saying, no, Mubarak must go, this is allowed. What kind of theology is this? And another one that I have always had an issue with is the interpretation of a verse which actually, if you understand it deeply, prevents you from changing your society. It's the verse that says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change the condition of a people, and the scholars that come out of Saudi and elsewhere normally say, until you change what's in yourself. In other words, the message has been, you do constant dawah,
self-reformation,
and you change yourself, and then the world will change somehow. Actually, if you understand that verse, it's talking about the condition and the state of a people will not change until people change it themselves. And now you see that. As the brother said, the people out there on the streets are not all Islamic, they've not all got that in their heads, but they've changed. They've changed something. Whereas the scholars have been telling us, no, unless all you change first and spend the rest of your life in endless self-reform, nothing will change.
Religious illiteracy.
So this revolution is great because it actually clarifies and exposes the false theology as well.
Okay,
I think just one thing for hope is that there are a lot of scholars who are also giving the opposite view. And I've seen a lot of some lectures coming out of Cairo, where scholars are talking about the need for change and the obligation for change, not just the need, but the fact that Islam has given you an obligation that you must change the oppression into a just society. So although, and I was reading that the Algerian Grand Mufti as well, he gave the same, he's actually in Saudi Arabia, and he gave the same opinion that it's haram to rebel. But the heartening thing is that there are a lot of scholars that are leading and saying we need to, it's an obligation to have that change as well. So we shouldn't forget about those scholars as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most of those get
Locked up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even surprisingly, some of the scholars who have actually got locked up, who spent time in Saudi jails, come back out after a reformation process. So they were anti-state, then they became pro-Saudi state, and these same scholars...
Torture process.
Yeah, and so lots of other stuff as well. From there, I can't remember the scholar now. He went to Tunisia, and in Tunisia he met Ben Ali, and he said, your government is an Islamic form of government, actually, well done. Ben Ali was a person who on live TV took off the headscarf of a woman off her head and said, now you're liberated. So these people, what planet they live living on, what these people are, they are, we're told they're like following classical Islam or traditional Islam, and they're, following the letter to the law. Okay, and they're coming out with opinions like these, and again the opinion that protesting is haram, whereas the verse says, "Inna Allah yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim." Allah does not change the condition of a people until the people change the condition. These are blatant verses, and plenty of ayat that the Prophet ﷺ said, you must, if you've got time, you must enjoin the good and you must forbid the evil. Otherwise Allah will about to be sending a punishment upon you, and even then your best ones will make dua. They will raise their hands in dua, Allah will not listen to them. And what about the Hadith al-Qudsi, where it's a famous example, we've heard it so many times, we've heard it in so many different lectures and from so many different Islamic groups who use the same evidence, but they've, this is lost in the process. The Hadith al-Qudsi about the angels who were sent to destroy a particular town, and they saw that in that town there was vice, there was criminality, there was all the things contrary to what Allah Ta'ala had told those people to do, but they found one person in constant worship and ibadah, and the angels, the malaika, they went back to Allah and they informed Allah, look, there's one of your believers here. They said, Allah says, start with that person first. Reason being is because he was living in that society and saw all the corruption, saw all the vice, and didn't do anything about it. So traditional Islam says change the status quo until it fits to what Islam actually demands of having a just, balanced society. And we have the famous verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Hajj, الَّذِينَ أَمَّكَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَأَمْرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهُوا عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. And when we establish those who are in authority, they establish the salah, they establish the zakah, they enjoin the good, and they forbid the evil. So I think even from an interpretation perspective, a lot of these things that are being said are not sense. One of the arguments they're using is that harm is befalling the ummah. So where was your fatwas when Iraq was being destroyed with 10 years of sanctions, followed by a 2003 invasion in which over 100,000 people were killed? Where's your fatwa where harm is befalling Pakistan with drone attacks, where thousands have been killed? Where's your fatwa there? Where's your fatwa when Gaza was being attacked by Israel? Where's your fatwa there when harm was befalling the ummah?
Blatant case of double standards.
You didn't
Not only that, there's a simple, forget all these things. The same scholars will lecture you till death about haram and halal. And they should. I'm not saying they shouldn't, and we need to know that. But when have you heard any of our ulama, there are some, obviously, talk about, is it halal for these rulers to accumulate the wealth that belongs to the people? These rulers have billions of pounds of wealth. When did Allah say that it belonged to them? And so why don't we have scholars who say this is haram?
Add on to the points that we're making here. I mean, there's a lot. For decades, the Ummah have known, some of these leaders, all the time, are puppets and so on. But what you see now is, I know the sister mentioned that, you know, she lives in fear. Men also live in fear, women live in fear, the whole society lives in fear. What you see now in the Muslim world is an unruly kind of zeal, you know, to remove this oppression, right? And an unruly kind of zeal to actually take on these leaders, and they've laid their lives down for this issue. So the ummah on the streets are now chanting La ilaha illallah, Ashad, Shaheed Habib Allah. Yeah, so they don't care about their lives anymore. So what we've got to go back to again is what it was these dictators that actually created this fear in the first place by reforming Islam, interpreting Islam for the Muslims. So Muslims like us would actually move away from Islam because there's so many different definitions of Islam, and then this gave rise to Muslim reactionary organizations, men and women. So you had the Islamic reformist parties, you had feminist Islamic women organizations. So what you see is that in society today you see loads and loads of organizations built upon a reaction to the fear that's been created. What needs to happen now, and the discussion that needs to take place now, is okay, what is the correct way for the Muslim world now?
Forward.
Yeah? So what is the correct way forward? And that has to be redefined by Islamic values. That has to be taken back to the Kitab of Allah, yeah, and the Sunnah of the Prophet. And that discussion has to take place amongst Muslims. And the discussion cannot be, wait a minute, you belong to this sect, you belong to that organization, you're this person, you're that person. Muslims need to have an open mind, yeah, get together and say, these are the commonalities we have. We all believe in Allah and His Messenger. Let's have this discussion. What is the way forward? Yeah, is the way forward a Western-backed reformist kind of constitution? Is the way forward, we sit down, we discuss, and whatever, like we have in Britain, we have Cameron and we have, the Lib Dems. Do we have a coalition? What is the real way forward? And if Islam is the haq and is the truth, Muslims can actually sit down, put the Islamic tenets on the table, and say, this is the correct Islamic constitution. Yeah, so we need to go out and say, out of all these Islamic organizations, who are the organizations out there that have a constitution in place to be implemented for the people? And that constitution, that Islamic kind of way forward, needs to be analyzed, it needs to be discussed, right? And then it needs to be decided whether this is the actual way forward.
And there's a fair point. I think there's always going to be the question as, who determines which of those organisations are, who makes those decisions. So I think there's a lot of...
Because there's a lot of organisations out there. I know a lot of people from, for example, there's a big discussion about Muslim Brotherhood, what is their involvement in Egypt and so on. And it's not an issue of Muslim Brotherhood and so on. We see that, in 1997 there was a poll, sorry, not 1997, 2007 there was a poll by Maryland University, and it did it across the Muslim world, and it said 80% of the Muslim world want the Sharia. Just a couple of years ago they redid that poll again, they revisited it again, and it went up to 89%, and 87% of the Egyptians wanted the Sharia. So the discussion is not whether Muslims want Sharia or not, that's by default the Muslim position. What needs to be discussed is who has that alternative today? Who is that political organisation that is willing to come forward and present that actual solution to the people? And that's what needs to be discussed.
Okay.
I mean, our start of the discussion was Facebook revolutions. So we're talking about a medium in which people were able to discuss ideas and then create some sort of movement and change from that. I mean, another example of this is when they go to Hajj. They meet people from the whole of the Muslim world there, and the discussions are quite frank, they're quite open, and also the Saudi regime can't regulate 3 million people on what they're talking about and what they can talk about. Hence you've always seen Iranian protests take place during Hajj time, so you have banners saying Al-Maut al-America, Al-Maut al-Israel, happening there. So I think whilst Muslims are in the midst of their discussions there, such as Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, they're discussing politics.
Language could sometimes be a barrier.
Language can be a barrier, but in most cases, people are getting along. So some people who can't speak Arabic, basic broken English here, there is a discussion and a discourse.
So are you proposing everyone goes to Hajj with their Blackberries and laptops and creates that social...
Not the social media, that social media exists on its own in the first place. So when we actually go there, we will hear statements about how they feel about their country's problems. And the fact that they're in a place, in a holy site, they are reminded by the khawf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's clear that it's a bit more, pristine. You're there in front of the hearts of Allah, in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mosque. You're a bit more pure in terms of your thinking and your inclination towards Islam. So they view then their world problem and say, look, don't we hear about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and how he was a just ruler and he used to have, in his last days he was worried that he left one coin somewhere and he'd be held accountable for that.
So I guess what we
and
can
this needs to be translated into government.
So I expect during the days ahead what we can expect is that things like the internet and the social media sites will be closed down in the hard period to avoid that happening perhaps.
Well, it already is. You're not allowed to discuss political, the concerns of the Ummah and political issues, you're not allowed to discuss those in Hajj. And there is an issue that the Muslim Ummah needs to discuss, and it's the role of Hajj. In Hazrat Umar's time, where we're talking about you can't protest. In Hazrat Umar's time, he used to make the rulers, the local rulers, stand up, and he used to ask people, have you got a grievance against this person? And here we're saying, you can't protest, you can't express your grievance. So there's
3 points. I didn't want to be conscious of time.
Develop a psychic within the Muslim world, a psychic that you cannot question the scholars, and that is forbidden somehow. I mean, I'm told these statements on a daily basis. The last one, that you cannot demonstrate or that you cannot question. So I think there's a psychic that's been developed, and I think that needs to be desensitized before we can move forward. That we can question. When you question somebody, you are not saying that I am not a believer, but I'm trying to get to a point of understanding, and that can only happen with a conversation, and that is being denied.
Okay, thank you. I've got plenty of questions, but apart from the ones that are coming on the blog, I'm just going to invite whether anyone from the audience has got some specific questions that they want to pose to the panel. So I'm conscious of time as well. We've probably got about 45 minutes. So the opportunity is there for anyone who wants a direct question to the panel. Feel free. Don't all jump at once. Otherwise I'll have the line right.
It's not a question, it was just a comment, but there are so many different opinions within Islam. And a lot of them are valid opinions. And historically we can see that sometimes there's this issue that because of the opinions that unity can't come. But historically we can see that the scholars always put their opinions forward, and it was the adoption of the ruler, of the Khalif or the Imam of the time, and the rule which he adopted was the one which was applied. So sometimes people raise the issue that there's so many different opinions, how can the Muslims become united? And that's where maybe the ruler needs to come before that unity can come.
I guess that begs the question, how do you...
Well, I mean, that's...
Point
that's the point, but I think that's really important, that if there is a central leadership, it's a political leader. Historically, the Muslim leader has always been a political leader, not just the leader of the mosque or a leader, just a religious figure. He's actually the leader of the Muslims, and it's his adoption, whichever opinion he feels is the strongest opinion and he adopts, that becomes a rule. So I think we need to, in discussions, if that ever comes up, we need to be clear that even though there are so many different opinions, it's the fact that there should be a leader to adopt an opinion which would become the rule.
Any questions for the panel? I'd like questions.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the panel a question is, why is the West, after attacking Libya, if you look at the dynamics of all the revolutions, in Egypt is the majority of the people revolting. In Libya, in Bahrain, Yemen, Oman, Tunisia, it's the majority of the population rebelling against the government. But the dynamics in Libya is different in a sense, is there's two tribes. And it's only one tribe that's rebelling against him. Now, I'm not for Gaddafi, I don't like him, I think he should go. But why, when other countries are brutalizing their people, why they're not going for that and just Libya? What do you think?
Would you like to?
Well, I think there's a. I said it was about trying to control a change and make sure that they maintain that control. Now with Libya, obviously Gaddafi is not under their control. He's not under anybody's control. You know, the guy is off his head.
He's not in control himself.
And also what's happening is, I mean, one of the articles I wrote a few years ago before the Israelis attacked Lebanon was called Iraq, Lebanon, Sudan and the Balkanization of the Muslim world. And in that there were some maps which showed the strategy for the Muslim world, which was to break it into small statelets. And I think here they've spotted that opportunity to divide Libya and to have a further Muslim land that is a small statelet. And also they have an oil interest. You know, they think they can get easy access. It's a small country, it's only 6 million population. But also the Libyan people have, compared to Egypt, I think certainly the Libyans I know in Manchester and elsewhere, there is a strong Islamic identity, and the resistance has always broadly been Islamic to Gaddafi. It's come from within the Islamic movements there. And the real fear is that actually what's happening, you're having a jihad as opposed to some general in Egypt saying we'll have a slow transition. So the system will totally be finished in Libya. So they will lose control of that system. And it's an attempt to make sure that they don't. And like in Afghanistan they knew the Soviets were defeated. But then the West came in, and what they did, they funded 6 or 7 groups. So the French funded Ahmad Shah Massoud, another one funded them, and the reason they funded them was to make sure that when Afghanistan was finally liberated, that the Mujahideen would not be united. There would be different factions, and that condition existed until the Taliban came and took control of the country. And even afterwards, as you know, after 9/11, they used those divisions to slaughter the people. So they're playing a very subtle game, and they're trying to keep control. I mean, it's interesting. Isn't it interesting that Tony Blair was telling us, I mean, this is a fantastic opportunity for us to talk to the general public, the British public. Tony Blair was saying, Muslims have a false sense of grievance. Now, with the start of this year, every non-Muslim on the planet knows what the grievances of Muslims are. And it's a fantastic opportunity to say, look, this is what your politicians have been doing. This is why the Muslim world is in turmoil. This is why there's violence in the Muslim world. And this is why there's a call for political change. Even some of the terrorism laws, they're ridiculous. Yeah. There's a case in 2007 which defines what terrorism is, and it actually involves a Libyan person. It says that if you call for the overthrow of somebody, even if it's in another country, that's terrorism, according to the definition. Now, if I was to call for the overthrow of Gaddafi today, how many people would think that was terrorism?
Freedom fighting.
I think you're right. It's trying to remain impartial, but I think there's certainly the opportunity, because given the events that we see, as I said, they're very much out of control. People on the ground are calling the shots, and then the media are trying to keep up with that, and the administrations are actually behind the media in then trying to control events. So I think what you find is that people are seeing the media, seeing the events unfold, and Muslim or non-Muslim, they can see the double standards. So I think as Muslims, it's a very good opportunity for us to actually give the dawah to non-Muslims, because they can see the double standards, they can see the contradictions, and it's something that we should be engaging in more so in the communities. Okay, I'm going to move on to a question about the forthcoming demonstration, which hasn't started yet, maybe in pockets, but in Pakistan. It's the term Inqilab in Pakistan. and really want to focus on us at home here in the UK. The question there is what are the implications for the Muslims or Pakistanis in the UK after the inqilab on the 23rd? And again, I want to give you the context of what I said earlier about David Cameron and his talk of national interest. We have national interests, and those national interests will determine how we respond. And if I was just to read you just 2 or 3 of the demands of again, the students who are working through Facebook in arranging this demonstration, some of their demands are, and I quote, "We demand that our foreign policy," so this is the foreign policy of the Pakistanis, "is based on integrity of the nation and does not serve the interests of the West. All foreign independent personnel and foreign troops should leave Pakistan. We want all airports, places used by FBI, CIA to be vacated." So I'm going to ask yourself initially, Anjum, in terms of when we talk, is there now a direct conflict of interests of the Pakistani people and David Cameron and his interests of the nation, and as Muslims living in this country, what are the implications for us? What the fallout, potential fallout of this situation?
I have to admit something, and I know it's on camera.
It's on camera. That's
don't
all
like
I'll
it
say.
at all. It gives me stomachache. I think international events impact local communities. And whatever happens in Pakistan, of course, has the fallout is seen here, not only in the United Kingdom, but all over the world. What's going to happen on 23rd? I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether that you will see that kind of revolution taking place that has happened in the Arab world. I'm not sure that will happen. And there's a reason. Pakistan is heterogeneously, it's difficult to unite because they're very different people, different, you have, is it 4 provinces you have? And they have so much conflict within themselves.
But in terms of the arrangement, if I can again just read to you what they're arranging, there's already demonstrations for 10 cities, which are across the provinces, and part of the rhetoric, if we want to call it as, we plan to continue the demonstrations until the demands are met. So there's no area for grey here, and they've got a list of at least 17, 18 demands, and this is one of them. So I would challenge you to say, even though it may be similar to the tribal issues, but yeah, we've got 4 regions. But essentially, these people are becoming united behind this one cause, and I would probably suggest that they may see it out in the same way as what we've seen in the Middle East. So
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'll be very honest with you. It
You
would be amazing to see.
You don't think they'll demonstrate their true colours as Pakistanis and fall out on this one?
Well, I was thinking about when Zulfikar Ali
Is that
Bhutto
what
was
you think?
hanged, and I was very young, thousands of years ago, and I remember asking, why didn't they come out? Why didn't they come out on the streets? Where were the people of Pakistan when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was being hanged? And maybe...
So let's assume they do come out. Let's assume they stay united.
Oh, well, get rid
So
of the
what are the implications for us here in Blackburn and the Northwest? As Muslims, Pakistanis, whatever label we...
How would it affect? I'm just trying to
how would
it
us?
affect
You
us
know,
here?
and you work in community cohesion. What's the impact going to be in the discussions you have and trying to perhaps defend the people in Pakistan for rising up against tyrannical rule and foreign interest, which David Cameron is saying, hey, he'll support that because that's our interest as a nation.
I cannot imagine that this is going to happen in Pakistan, and therefore I cannot respond to that.
Okay, let me ask someone who can imagine it happening
I cannot have it.
Majed?
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely connected. I mean, we're living in a global village. Events that happen here in Pakistan will affect us here. That's why we have channels like AOI News, AOI Digital, and we have Geo here.
I believe most people on here too are watching the cricket as well.
They are, yeah. So they're watching the cricket as well. There's a massive connection there. So there's no disconnection. So events that happen in Pakistan, we are informed about them because within actually most of us tend to go back because it's a country which we have got cultural and historical roots with because of family ties. So people are transiting all the time. The fact that rulers from Pakistan come to Britain, so we have Nawaz Sharif in '97 when he came down with this campaign called Mulk Savaro Garz Utaro, and he was begging people in Platfields Park in Manchester for money. you invest, today, give this expired money, and we will save our economy. So the fact that these rulers believe that Pakistanis living in Britain, they've got some sort of clout, some sort of weight, stands quite highly in terms of this discussion about we do have an impact on what happens in Pakistan, even from here as well. So Musharraf has been in the UK many a time and has been challenged by many groups who protested outside and have even accounted him heavily in the last time that he came around to Manchester. The Tehreek-e-Insaf, they have branches inside here in terms of Manchester, London, Birmingham. So there's a definite connection there. And we are pretty much in tune with what's happening in those countries. Any change that happens here, we will then have to, either tolerate that or either say, right, okay, that's enough, we're going to have to call for this change, which means X, Y, and Z. And we ourselves might even go over and say, right, okay, we will help inside this this movement for change.
Just to add on to that, I think Muslims in Britain need to really seize the opportunity as a way forward to discuss what the leaders of these countries have been doing to us for many, many years. And there's a commonality again with the Arab world, and I know we're saying it's a little bit different to the Arab world. The people in the Arab world wish to live in pure fear. If you travel in the Muslim world, you can't say anything to the taxi driver, you can't go to the barbers and have an open Islamic discussion. I went to Egypt, I was followed into the mosque, I was questioned, I was at the airport for 6 hours. So the thing is that the people in Pakistan have always been known to be rebellious, and have always been known to, hold grudges. And this time the grudge is against the government, because what their demands are no different to the demands you see in the Muslim world. Ultimately, they want an end to this colonization, this imperialism that's taken place over centuries, if you like. So I think the Muslims in Pakistan will take strength from what's happened, and what the Muslims have come to realize is that real opinion, real authority lies with the people. It does not lie with the leaders, because the leaders are only leaders if the people follow them.
But the Muslims here, well, how will we
so what we need to do is we need to be quite elaborate in our discussions. We need to
we'll give them the opportunity to do that? Do you not think that the climate has been created such that they've already, Cameron has set his stall out, he's laid the position out for the British citizens, which includes us, for the populace, and he's already preempted that discussion that needs to be taken, such that you won't give you the space? Is that not the reality?
Despite that, we need to remember that when Zardari came to Birmingham, it was a former PPP supporter who was inside the building, listening to him, and he took off his shoe and he threw it at his face, attempted to throw it away. He didn't get near to him, but he made his point. And in the Geo interview after that, he said, for these rulers, these corrupt rulers, he said it, in the Mirpuri language, which is my thirpur is good enough for you. I don't think many people understand what he was saying. It was my shoes are enough for you. The shoe is the symbol for what the journalist did in Iraq when Bush came down, and then it became a symbol of protest and this is how we value you, this is our opinion of you, where you think that we think so much of you, we want the West to come in and tell us what to do all the time. So these things are happening right in our doorstep. So if Zardari comes, of course we can say things quite openly. This is obviously we've got an opportunity here, we've got space here, we can challenge certain opinions. Musharraf came down, he was challenged on his position on certain things. He lied out of his teeth. I was inside the conference room. He said, look, I didn't know nothing about Afia Siddiqui. Which is rubbish, because according to the Human Rights Watch, 500 people were missing in 2003, of which he signed a document and gained money from the US, which included Muazzam Beg, who came back to Britain and then wrote his book, Enemy Combatant, and raised these discussions that, look, this is what Musharraf, he lied to the people. He said, we're doing it, for national interest, for the sake of Pakistan, but it was nothing like that. So if we've got the opportunity to raise those opinions, and even some of the demands that are there, we should look to those demands that these people, this movement is making in Pakistan. If we agree with them, then we need to then support them from here as well, then, because at the end of the day, if we're from Pakistan,
how do you support them? What would you suggest? What should we do?
We can be having the very same events that they're having there, and initiate movements, grassroots movements, which first of all are educated about the politics in Pakistan. So when they look at the Dr. Afia Siddiqui case, on the one hand, she's a Pakistani citizen who's been taken off Pakistani soil by the CIA and then tried for a crime which didn't even happen in the US. Whereas Raymond Davis, and she's got 86 years for that, whereas Raymond Davis, again, he did a crime within Pakistan, therefore he should be tried by Pakistani law. Why was he given back for? So there's arguments like that that we need to put forward and give a solution for. So, you know, put some
So we need
American citizen. American citizen. Dual nationality, absolutely. So she was not a Pakistani citizen. She probably like us because we hold dual nationality. But the point...
So we should be supporting this green and white revolution that has been done.
I support... Look, Nelson Mandela said that it's honourable to support anyone who wants to liberate themselves. I will support any peaceful, to a certain extent, revolution. Considering the fact that I've been called as a very violent person. But you know, the Arab Revolution, they have something in common. They have commonalities. I don't see that commonality within Pakistan. I don't. There's heterogeneous. There's a lot of difficulties. I don't see that happening. Maybe not on the 23rd. Maybe that's a catalyst. That something will happen. Alhamdulillah, something will happen. But I don't see that kind of a revolution that's taking place in Bahrain, Libya, or Tunisia taking place in Pakistan.
We have seen some similar scenes like this when the state of emergency was declared in 2008 by Musharraf. We had a lawyers' movement who wanted the chief judge to be restored back again. So I think there was a slight glimpse there.
Yeah.
Again, going back to Jahangir's point, initially it was one of those things where something has started off, but we couldn't necessarily call it a full revolution because there was no vision after that. It was just about Chief Justice Ki Bahali, getting back into power. We want him to be in the position, because if we sat in the position, then he'll open up cases against Musharraf. Musharraf will go, and then we'll get Zardari into power. That's all it was about. But it got certain people kind of like psyched up, you know, this is time for change. But again, what I think Asid mentioned, you know, the change needs to be looked into, it needs to be defined, and I think some of the points that we mentioned there, I don't think anybody can really disagree with them. They're fairly broad, valid points that if you raise them with any Pakistanis, they will say, yeah, this is the change.
I think we should highlight the point.
We are very emotional and we are very proud Pakistani heritage people. You probably not even born in 1967. Do you remember the first, it was in 1967, the first war between India and Pakistan? And the passion in people to support their country. They used to get packets. The people used to get their wages in packets. And I remember in a small place called Accrington, there used to be a bank called United Bank. And here in Blackburn, there was a Habib Bank. And people on Friday would get their packet. They didn't even open it. They would queue up to send it to Pakistan to support their country. Do we have the same passion today? I'm not saying that it shouldn't exist. I'm questioning, does it exist? I am not convinced.
I think there will be a revolution in Pakistan, inshallah. But I think there's some more work to be done. There's a number of differences in Pakistan and the Arab world. First of all, the Arab world, where you've seen these revolutions, there's a very, very high degree of literacy. Pakistan has one of the lowest rates of literacy in the third world. And that has an impact on the ability for people to have access to internet, social media and all that. Secondly, obviously, Pakistan already has an elected government. According to Cameron, it's Democrats, so what are they asking for? Another election? So there's a bit more, and the military, the role of the military in Pakistan owns immense assets and is actually the system in Pakistan. They own the bakeries, there's a book, fantastic book, I forget the name of it, and it's called I forget the author, Military Incorporated. And it lists, it's one woman, Pakistani woman, who's listed all the financial interests that the military have. So the military is actually the ruling system in Pakistan. So that has to be undone somehow. And also, you know, again, Islamic movements there, the Jamaat Islami and all these, because they've actually, there's an important point about our scholars and Islamic movements. And this is in the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided him with a wealthy wife. Now there must be some hikmah in this, that he would be never dependent on anybody for his living. Because once you're dependent, you get your funds from somewhere, you're compromised. And this is what's happened with a lot of Islamic movements. The situation in Iran with Imam Khomeini was never dependent on anybody. He never joined any political system. He never joined, and it was because of that he was able to speak. And this is the same, by the way, all of the four schools of thought, the Imams were all independent, they were all suffered, they all were punished and imprisoned because they never sided with the rulers. And this is an important part of Sufi, the genuine Sufi, jihadi Sufis of the past who reformed their people, then led jihad movement. They were all independent. We don't have this situation in Pakistan, and the Pakistani army is, and there is an actual point here about, we put great weight of the armies in Egypt and elsewhere, but don't rely on them, because you could end up with the Pakistani situation. And as Imam Khomeini realized, if you have an alternative ideology, which we must, as the brother says, we must have, an alternative view. What do we want to replace the existing system? The first thing he did, what did he do? He created a military force to protect the new revolution and the ideology. So jihad and revolution have to go together. And this is something that we have to realize, that the armies are not going to hand you control just like that. And Pakistan has unfortunately, I'm really saddened by that's why I started off my talk with two movements, the revolutionary movement and jihad movement. They are the only methods of successful change that have worked and will work, because they are both Islamic in the Muslim world. Wherever you've had a political party, it's failed. Wherever you've had a jihad movement, they managed to get rid of the system. Where you've had a Islamically inspired revolution, that's got rid of the system. Our military, we should be ashamed about the Pakistani military's role. What they did in the northwest frontier, they wiped whole towns out. And in East Pakistan, it's the same. And that's what led to the breakup. The rape that they did in East Pakistan. And they've never won a war. These armies in the Muslim world, they are not there to fight external enemies. They're there to oppress us, the people. And what we have to do, unfortunately, because Pakistan's theology is so divided, we have to keep exposing the human rights, the Mafia Siddiqui and the hypocrisy. But what we have to show is the link between the rulers and the poverty of the masses. And this is what we've not done. And our scholars must be engaged. When Zardari lines his pockets and he takes aid from the West, who pays that? This is haram. What he's doing, you take an international loan from the States or anywhere else, then you raise VAT or taxes on the people, and because the rich aren't paying the taxes, it's the people who are paying the debt on the interest on the debt that they have pocketed. So the wealth that they're stealing in the government in Pakistan, and all the rulers have been doing it, the people are paying, and that's what's making them poor. And this is the suffering, the real suffering that's going on in Pakistan, is the poverty of the people. And we must show the link between the illegitimacy of the regime and the poverty of the masses of Pakistani people, and that's what will bring about the change of the revolution. Sorry,
some of the demands that have been made inside this Inqilab Pakistan movement, they rested upon experiences of, I would say, over the last 10 years. These youth have seen in front of their eyes, they've seen dictator and they've seen democrats, and they can't see no difference. They saw in 2001, the sheriff said, we will give unstinting support to America, which was a word which I had never heard of before, and I've actually looked at the dictionary to find it.
It's my favourite saying, especially with the
I can't
accent.
find the dictionary. But he said he'll give unstinting support. And then at the same time we find Zardari doing no different. We found in 2003, 2001, 2007, 2008, Musharraf, organising the state of emergency because the judges who were on the panel at that time were going to issue cases against him and get him out of power and say his presidency was illegitimate. So he changed that, and when Zardari came into power, he did exactly the same thing. He reshuffled the judges and brought in judges who were more favourable towards him. Poverty and these issues, again, they remain the same. Nothing's changed. In terms of foreign policy, nothing's changed. In terms of education and health, nothing's changed. I think, most importantly now, the youth, they can start looking at these issues. What exactly is the difference?
True.
And if we're living in a democracy and 51% put their hand up in Parliament and say drone attacks must continue, then what was the point of installing a democracy in the first place then? Whatever decisions are being made then, that's where the conflict is. That we hold certain values and ideas which are based on Islam, and the decisions which are being made in Parliament completely conflict with that. And even unfortunately, the Islamic parties in Pakistan, they've been complicit in legitimizing the government even further, which goes back to the point of Saudi scholars. So Musharraf, he struck a deal with the Muttahid Majlis Amal, the MMA, the alliance of Jamaat Islami and other parties, and Fazl Rahman and all other kind of the Qazi Hussain, etc. What did they do? They said, right, okay, we will have the Northwest Frontier Province area. Let us do whatever we want. And all they did was, this is all that Islam was, is no to cinema and segregated schools. But the fact was that tanks, which the American forces were using, were driving through those same areas where these people had allegedly Islamic rule, and were then bombing Afghanistan from there. So people now can see into these things. Number one, democracy and dictatorship really is two sides of the same coin. There's no real difference. Number two is the Islamic parties who are there are no different to Musharraf and Zardari. What has Qazi Hussain really got to offer? What was this guy who wears an orange turban, Maulana Fazl Rahman, former known as Patton one, yeah, known as Maulvi Diesel to the people in Pakistan as well, because he had a position of power for Minister of Petroleum, I think, was under the Benazir government. He was the same person who said initially Benazir cannot rule Pakistan because she's a woman, because Islam forbids her, and then he changed his opinion when she gave him position.
Okay.
So these demands are there now. I think personally, when we look at them, they are actually based upon the experience and part of the last decade, at least for these young people.
Yeah.
They want a change which is, again, as Asid has been mentioning, which is Islamic. Going back on the point which the sister she raised, it needs to be based upon some of our history, which was the 1920s, the Khilafat movement. We had 1 million people in one of their conferences when the Khilafah was destroyed in Turkey. It was the Khilafat movement of the Maulana Mohammed Ali Johar brothers who sent a delegation to the Mustafa Kemal demanding that he not destroy the Khilafat at that particular time. And that's one of the demands inside there.
Okay, that's good. I think another point we raised with this issue of the secession of East Pakistan as well.
Yeah, I think it's terrible.
I think it's terrible because it can't happen. Pakistan may have a better cricket team than today. But anyway, we've got 10 minutes left. So
the duty. I mean,
it's going to have a final question.
Wikimeal. Go on Wikimeal. Wikimeal, and you'll find a list of the most corrupt Pakistanis. And on there, Zardari's wealth has gone up from 3 billion to 10 billion since he came back to power. He's the second most richest person in Pakistan. Nawaz Sharif is at number 4. On Zardari's, it says source of income, government. This is what we do. But if the scholars are failing, it's our duty to expose, what is unjustifiable, what is haram, and what is permissible, and we have to create that awareness, and we have to create that alternative vision and ideology. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say just leave it to the ulama.
Okay. We've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to open the floor for a final question before I got mine, and then allow maybe a couple of minutes for everyone to wrap up around this final question. So, at the back.
Brother Jahangir, you talked about only revolutionary movements or jihadi movements can bring about change. I want to put this to the panel. Did I get your point correctly, firstly?
That's based on my analysis of the last 50 years. That's exactly what's happened.
Maybe you can give some more evidences, you know, because I've been following the news and I've seen much change by either jihadi movements or revolutionary
Taliban
movements.
came to power. Jihad, Iran, revolution, Lebanon, Christian state, the structure, jihad movement, Palestine. So, you know,
What do you say that's real change? But, I mean,
it's not real change, but it's brought change.
Okay.
But you have to have, you know, you have to have the intellectual revolution as well. The two, what I said was the two have to go hand in hand, and that's where the failure happens. So in Afghanistan, the intellectual revolution was behind, not through any fault of their own, because they inherited, something that had been totally destroyed. You know, we can't judge those people in Afghanistan because, first of all, there was nothing there. You know, people say they didn't allow the women to work. Where was the work for men? There was no work. It was all, rocks and bulldozers. Where were the schools? They had 3 years. And in time, they may have created the framework and thinking, and some of them had that.
Okay, I'm going to draw to a final question now, which is, we've probably touched on it, but I think I'll allow each of the panellists to sum up maybe the discussion we had this afternoon, and maybe just a couple of minutes each. And the question really is submitted again on a blog. What do you think the next world order will look like? So I think it's a culmination of a lot of what we discussed, but maybe 2 minutes from each of the panelists before we close and start with the again.
I suppose for me there is only one world order, and that has to be the lived experience of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no other world order.
That's succinct enough. Didn't even take 2 minutes. So you even have another
I'm going to read you something which is, my mother sent me to a Catholic school, and what she would do is she said, I want you to have a religious education. So every day when I came home, I used to tell her that she would ask me to tell her the stories that I was taught. And the stories that I was taught, she would then correct from the Islamic position, saying, this is what, although there were similarities, she would say, no, this is the position. And one of the things that we have to understand is our purpose of being on this earth. And this, I'm going to read you something from a Christian source, which many people don't actually know about. How many of you know the Lord's Prayer?
I do.
How many of you understand what it says? I'll read it to you. Now think about it.
At school.
You all used to read it at school. Now think about this. Our Father, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not physical Father. In those days, if you were, that was the phrase used to refer to the Creator. Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, Allah's will, your kingdom, Allah's will, on earth as it is in heaven. Now, isn't that beautiful? This is what Rowan Williams said. If somebody said to you, give me a summary of the Christian faith on the back of an envelope, and the best thing would be to write our Lord's Prayer. So, this is what Hazrat Isa al-Islam was telling them on the Sermon on the Mount, that it's the duty of man to establish Allah's will on earth, because He controls everything else. And that is our purpose. And we contain the last message and the messenger who completed that task, as Hazrat Isa al-Islam predicted. So that is our purpose, and that is our order. That is the Islamic order. The Muslim world needs an Islamic order. We need a global Islamic resistance movement against the current political order in our countries, and that the world needs.
It's actually a need for humankind, isn't it?
The world needs an Islamic world order. I'll finish with these stats. I mean, this is what we need to show as well. The conditions that have led to revolutions in the Muslim world are present now in the Western world. And you'd be amazed at just
You've got 1 more minute.
1 more minute. If you look at the debt situation, I've got these figures from the CIA World Factbook, by the way.
Oh,
So,
thank you for telling us.
I haven't got them here. But if you look at, no, they're not here, I must have left them. If you look at the levels of public debt, gross domestic product, the United States and Britain are one of the most indebted nations. If you look at the total external debt, the US is 14 trillion, United Kingdom 9 trillion, and I think some of the Muslim countries, Pakistan is only so many, 50, 60 or so many billion. So the poverty that you see in the Muslim world, which is fueled by debt interest and the current economic system, is going to affect the Western world very soon. You're seeing it now. They're cutting public expenditure, they can't pay the debts, and that whole system, I call it the rule of, it's not democracy. Money is their God. Every time you hear a Western politician, what do they say? I wonder what the markets say.
Yeah.
The market is their God, and that's their political system, and that system is coming to an end, and it cannot be sustained, and we need to teach our fellow men and women in this country that that system will destroy your life.
Yeah, I mean, I won't give my own opinion and what I think, but I'll give you some facts. So I can't remember his name, but about 4 months ago, a close advisor, military advisor to David Cameron, he said that the role and sole reason that British forces are in Afghanistan is to prevent the return of a caliphate. So you can hear from these views from politicians. These are army people who are stationed in the Muslim world to prevent an Islamic uprising, an uprising which will kind of model itself on Islam, which will implement what Rasulullah as the final and complete message, which means disaster for Western powers because a lot of interests are at stake there. We found many of the people, Charles Clarke in 2005, the former Foreign Secretary for Britain, he said, we will never tolerate the rise of a caliphate or the implementation of Sharia in the Muslim world. The British government will never tolerate that. So we can already see from the stances in terms of what's happening on the streets and the fear of some of these politicians that what it possibly can translate into. And they talk about that vacuum, they talk about the space and how organizations can fill that and basically lead the masses into a direction then, which is an Islamic form of change. So I think some of these facts, I think we're really going to digest them.
Yeah.
There's nothing, which is hidden. It's not like, some sort of like secret, I haven't got them from like some sort of like, locked website or something. It's out in the public domain. They make these comments themselves. We've heard Dick Cheney make the same comments. We've even heard George Bush make comment and use the word caliphate in his own words. So this is a big fear for some of these politicians. Actually, sorry, Musharraf in Manchester when he came down, and when some of the protesters, they challenged him, and he said, I know who these people are. They're from this particular organization, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and these guys, they demand the caliphate. So even the head of a state who's been in power, who's been the American trump card in that region, knew that he was being challenged, by people who say there needs to be Khilafah, Islamic rule. This will bring us better prosperity and progression for our nation, not what these guys are doing.
Yeah, just to finish, I think Muslims in the West need to realise that the sun doesn't rise in the West. Yeah, that we have a system from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We shouldn't be fooled by Western, the West intervening in our countries. Just like we saw in Iraq, we had the start of the intervention was a no-fly zone, and then what we saw is the West coming in and taking control. So what Muslims should do is they should push their own armies to protect the Muslims. So for example, in Egypt you have 1.6 million soldiers for soldiers. You have 364 fighter air jets. These are enough to remove Gaddafi. What we foresee in the future, inshallah, is a promise of Allah. And I know we've mentioned Nelson Mandela and the Lord's Prayer, but the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "My ummah, your ummah al-wahida, your harb al-wahida, biladah al-wahida, wa sallah al-wahida." So my ummah, your one ummah, Your land is one land, your fight is one fight, and your peace is one peace. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَوَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لِيَسْتَخْلِفَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. That this is the promise of Allah, that those of you that do righteous deeds and you enjoy what is good, that He will surely grant you succession to the present rulers of the earth.
I'd like to thank all of you for attending, taking the time out. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for taking the time out to come to this event. We started with the name of Allah. We asked for assistance. We always ask for assistance. We pray that this gathering, we came together for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we pray that it was surrounded by the angels. And may Allah give us the strength to continue this work and keep us sincere in this. So, Jazakallah khair. As we said, as Bayana, we will find more events, so do look out, do keep your noses to the ground. Inshallah, if this format works, we'll be having future events probably on a quarterly basis. But again, Jazakallah khair for attendance, and assalamu alaikum.
Can somebody put me out of my misery and give me the cricket score, please?
Have we stopped recording, please?